I'm an athletic therapist, kinesiologist in my day-to-day life at work, which means that I see people and work with people all the way from 5 years old to 95 years old, across all different workplaces, across all different types of employment. Farmers, of course, high-performance athletes, and even grandmothers and grandparents of all sorts. I work both in urban settings as well as in rural settings, and having grown up rurally, I have had my fair share of experience in agricultural communities. I help clients of all backgrounds deal with their physical complaints, but in turn that results in me helping them with overall lifestyle complaints as well, as everything's connected. So the nature of today's presentation, I'm going to be having you guys move around quite a bit, so if you're capable or if you're able to and open to it, thank you all for joining me today. When I have farmers or people in the agricultural community coming in to see me in the clinic, I often hear some common things. Often it's complaints of chronic pain, usually low back pain, shoulders, and knee pain, and or a long history of complaints ranging from traumatic accidents, different accidents that have happened in their workplace, high blood pressure, and no time to deal with any of these things. When I really get talking to these clients, there's almost always an underlying theme of chronic stress, fatigue, and disconnect from the messages that their bodies are sending them, often for years before they've ended up finding me or seeking other resources. We do live in a culture that insists that we are busy, and in agricultural communities, this is no different. The difference for those in ag being that there are certain times of the year where we often don't actually have time to treat ourselves or deal with injuries or pain or health dysfunction. As a therapist, this means that issues that prevent function are either being ignored, pushed back in priority, no matter how insistent they may be, or medicated during the busy seasons, and then hopefully assessed and dealt with and treated during the quieter times of the year when those occur. The goal here is to prevent more debilitating issues from arising, of course, and this goal is going to require more than just a pill or a prescription or a few weeks of corrective exercise. This requires a holistic lifestyle change in most cases. If there's one thing I know about those in the agricultural community is that they're tough as nails, and they're also stubborn. This means that they're more than capable of changing the common trend of pain, dysfunction, and poor long-term health that is somehow normal in today's society. Often the act of prevention means that we need to reframe our thinking from one of reaction to one of more consistent daily awareness of ourselves and the little things we can do each day to maintain that connection. So today we're going to talk about the use of movement as medicine and how it can be used as a simple way to change health outcomes in the farm or in the office or in our everyday lives, as everything is always connected. Exercise itself is statistically proven over and over again as one of the most effective treatments for the majority of major expenses on our healthcare system. These things being things like cardiovascular diseases, chronic conditions such as diabetes, obesity, chronic pain, and mental health, and even some cancers. If you look at the majority of prescribed pharmaceutical treatments today, they always come with a statement, works best with appropriate exercise and diet. How and how much someone moves is going to tell me a lot about their health. Glancing at somebody's body language and their posture automatically tells me about their mental and emotional state, and that posture will also tell me what or if someone is predisposed to in terms of musculoskeletal dysfunction. So when we look at health, we're talking a lot about health problems and diseases and dysfunction in our bodies, but in order to really figure out where those things come from, we have to have an understanding of what health is. Health is a pretty dynamic topic. It encompasses our physical, mental, emotional, environmental, and spiritual states. The role of each of these factors plays in our individual health is going to be completely unique to each one of us, meaning what's healthy for you over here is going to be completely different for somebody else down the road. The quality of our health is largely dependent on two factors, these two things being our hardware and our software. So our hardware is things like our genetics, things that we're born with. There are of course things that we're going to be predisposed to in our health based on these genetic factors that we can't necessarily control. However, more and more research is now starting to show that we can actually determine what comes of these predisposing factors based on our lifestyle choices day to day, and that those things are our software. So our software is those lifestyle choices that we make daily, things like our diet, our movement habits, our mental and emotional hygiene, and our perception of our environment around us. How does movement play a role in all these things related to our health? Lack of movement, something that is statistically shown in over 50% of our North American population, can and will cause a decrease in our metabolism, which is the efficiency in our physiology, a decrease in our lymphatic systems, our circulation, our immune function, and a decrease in our energy, sleep quality, and mood quality, as well as a decrease in our stress tolerance and nervous system perception. So when we really look at the big picture, how we move, how often we move affects every piece of the puzzle when it comes to our bodies and our internal systems, and this, of course, is going to interact with how we are day to day in terms of health. Poor movement leads to joint degeneration, muscle compensations, and postural dysfunction. And these are the biggest factors when it comes to pain and injury. And currently, 1/4 of our population deals with chronic pain on some level. We can move enough, but if we don't move well enough, then dysfunction is still going to occur in our systems. The vicious cycle here is that poor movement is going to lead to a lack of movement. And if we're in pain, we're going to be less likely to move in our daily lives and make healthy lifestyle choices. Pain itself is a huge stress on our system. To put this into perspective for our work in agriculture, if we as individuals aren't moving well or moving often enough in relation to our day-to-day wellness, then our ability to be productive and innovative in our workplace is going to severely decrease. And we've probably all experienced it at some point. If you're in pain or if you're extra stressed, your productivity is next to nothing because your brain and your system is so focused on getting you or dealing with that pain that you're experiencing. We know that movement and proper breathing practices boost the release of good chemicals like serotonin, dopamine, glutamate, and GABA endorphins in our brain. And these are all major factors in managing chronic conditions like depression, ADHD, sleep disorders, and anxiety. Regular movement and exercise, as well as breath work, enhances circulation, which includes blood flow to the brain. And this is going to increase energy, brain cell growth, memory, and focus. And it's also an important factor in stress management, recovery from illness, and emotional fatigue, as well as sleep health. Exercise also normalizes things like glucose, insulin, and leptin levels in the body, and normalized levels of these three things are going to contribute to the prevention, and therefore the treatment, of almost all chronic diseases. Our lymphatic system, circulation, and immune system are largely dependent on the contraction and the movement of our musculoskeletal system to stay efficient, and in this light, movement and exercise increases our ability to fight off disease. And of course, we know that regular exercise and corrective exercises are key in treating and preventing cardiovascular conditions, osteoarthritis and strokes, managing conditions like diabetes, obesity, depression, and anxiety, as well as greatly improving our perception of stress and pain. One of the things that I love most about movement, or using movement as medicine, is that it's fully accessible to each and every one of us at little to no cost. Health, at least not right now, cannot be sold as a tangible product. There's no pill you can take to become healthy. To achieve and maintain health, we need to revert back to an attitude that we all have the resources we need to be healthy built into us. And often the trick here is just remembering these simple abilities and seeking guidance when it comes to the fact that we've lost our way in many contexts. So, the nature of what I do of work is getting people moving, which means today we're going to be doing a little bit of moving, because I wouldn't be a good movement teacher if I didn't make you do something. So let's get everybody to stand up if you're comfortable doing so. And if you don't mind, I'd like it if you took your shoes off as well. For those of you doing this begrudgingly and thinking, well, my shoes are, hey, I don't want to take my shoes off because I'm in a public place and that's weird, or the fact that you have been told at some point in your life that shoes are what you need to move to be healthy, hear me out for a bit. So while you're standing here, just take a second, sink into what your body feels like today. So root yourself into your feet a bit, root yourself side to side, shift your weight back and forth. Maybe just pick up where you're holding any tensions, where you're feeling like you can't move into today, what it feels like with your shoes on. When it comes to shoes and orthotics, I go on this rant a lot, and I'll try and keep it brief for you guys today. But shoes and orthotics, of course, have their place, similar to how a crutch has its place after we break our leg, or a winter jacket has its place when it's below zero outside. But everything we need to have a healthy, functioning, pain-free feet, and therefore knees, hips, back, and total posture, we have access to organically. You wouldn't continue to use a crutch past the point where your bone has healed, nor would you wear your winter jacket inside for long periods of time. Shoes essentially are there to protect us from the environment, but that's their most effective purpose, in my opinion. They essentially do the job of our feet for us, which means when we're wearing them, the brain stops connecting into our feet. And when the brain stops connecting into our feet, it also sets us up for no foundation, really. We're essentially walking on pillows all the time. The brain can't figure out how to stabilize itself properly. If you've ever seen a video or had a pet yourself where you've put like booties on it in the winter when it's going for a walk and the animal's all of a sudden walking all funny, as hilarious as that is, it's actually a prime example of what our brain is trying to fight through when we put something on our feet, because it really shuts off the nervous system's connection to half our body, essentially, and makes it very hard. But I will stop that right now. There's lots to talk about on feet. So standing nice and tall outside of your shoes, if you're comfortable doing so, I want you all to close your eyes and just take a few big deep breaths. And I'm gonna call out my mom here because she's sitting in the back and not standing up and participating, so come on, Mom. So standing nice and tall, closing your eyes, take a few deep breaths. Feel where you can breathe into your body, where is tight, where maybe you can feel yourself shifting your weight to out of habit. And just take note of where you're positioning your body weight. Are your knees hyperextending back towards the wall? What happens if you let those knees relax forward a little bit? What happens to your pelvis? What happens to your rib cage? Where do you feel your weight shift to as you make subtle changes? Moving our awareness down to our feet. Try and spread your toes out as far as you can, as wide as you can, while keeping the toes on the ground. Can you move those toes? Are you aware of what your toes can do? Is your first thought, my feet don't move that way? Most people have that reaction. This is something, the simple act of moving your toes around, we should all have easy control of. If you don't have control of this, this tells me you probably have a lot of other things going on in your body, and this is something we need to start changing. So play with the movement of trying to spread your toes out, shifting your weight in the feet. Shift your weight forwards and backwards until you're able to find a balance point somewhere in the center of your foot. And in doing so, make sure that those toes are pointed straight forward so you're not rotating out in the feet, really common compensation. And see how that simple act of turning the feet inwards changes your balance. Do you feel a little bit more unstable? Do you feel like you have to shift forwards, have to shift back, shift into one side? Try and find that center point, equally balancing on both feet, right in the middle of the foot. And once you've found that, keeping the knees relaxed, think of tucking that pelvis underneath you so the rib cage and the pelvis can stack right on top of each other. And then roll your shoulders back and down, thumbs to the outside so the hands are open, tuck your chin back a bit, and take a few more big deep breaths right in this position. Even if it feels stiff, even if it feels tense, just spend a minute or so breathing in this position. As you're breathing, think of expanding all the way down into the hips with that breath. See if you can get that breath as deep as you can go. And now relax everything. And just take note of where you shifted back to. What's your habitual posture? So the simple act of practicing this aware posture, where we're taking time to go through a whole body and align it, this is something we're all capable of. We all know what alignment looks like and feels like on some level. And then doing kind of a contract relax like we just did, where you spend some time there and then relax down and see where you fall back to, is a really great way to build an awareness of things you need to work on. Awareness is one of the biggest building blocks when it comes to actually changing anything in our lives, whether it be a habit seemingly unrelated to your health, something at work, or something in our own bodies. We need to first have an awareness of where we're starting from, and then we're going to find a lot of solutions just in that awareness alone. You can all have a seat again. So next thing we're going to talk about is one of our most fundamental processes, and one of my favorite topics is breathing. So it sounds silly to have some focus put on breathing. We all know how to breathe. We do it without thinking all the time. But that is unfortunately part of the problem. We do it without thinking most of the time. Unfortunately, most people today have forgotten the proper mechanics or the biomechanics of breathing, and this has a huge role on the rest of our system on almost every level. Our body, of course, is going to keep doing things that it knows how to do, things that we've built habits in, things that we've picked up in the easiest way possible along the way. However, our bodies and our brains are always going to skew towards habits that we've created for them, and our breathing pattern is a habit that we form through our lives that will affect, like I said, the rest of our breathing. So we're going to do a little bit of a breathing assessment in a seated position. Normally I'd have you all lying down, but I'll be nice and keep you seated today. So in this sitting position, we're going to make sure that we're sitting up nice and tall, and our feet are both planted on the ground. And if you want to keep your shoes off, please keep your shoes off. I highly recommend. So sitting nice and tall here, I want you to close your eyes again, just so we can shift our awareness to what is actually going on in our whole bodies. And with one hand, I want you to put one hand on the chest, in the middle of the chest, and one hand on the sides of the rib cage, or on the side of the rib cage. And just take a few big deep breaths here. And as you're taking those deep breaths, I want you to be aware of two things. Which of those two hands is moving more? How long you can extend an inhale and exhale for? And if you feel any tightness while you're doing this. So take about 3 more big deep breaths here, being aware of those 3 things. Good. So for those of you who noticed that you couldn't inhale or exhale for longer than 3 or 4 seconds, you have something to work on. For those of you that noticed that that chest hand was moving a bit more than that bottom side hand, you have something to work on. For those of you who felt no restrictions and could take a huge big deep breath and felt that side of the ribcage moving quite a bit, you're perfect at this anyway. I'm going to guess, though, that most of you found something that was a little bit restricted in your breath alone. So now I want you to keep the same position, sitting up nice and tall, feet rooted down to the ground. Bring both hands to the side of the ribcage. And when we talk about breathing, what I'm really training you to do is to breathe from your diaphragm, which is the muscle that sits kind of right underneath our ribcage that is responsible for our breathing mechanics. Most of us at some point in our lives have reverted to breathing from our upper body muscles up here. Typically, I see that happen, well, everybody I meet does this at some point. Usually when they come to see me, they're doing this because they're in pain, but that shallow breath pattern comes from our fight or flight response in our nervous system, which is also our stress state in our nervous system. And most of us, 9 times out of 10, spend most of our time in a stress state, unfortunately. This is something we need to take ourselves out of if we're going to work on anything health-related. So when we work on diaphragmatical breathing, we're actually reversing this process. We're bringing ourselves back to a baseline state because the simple act of breathing properly alone is going to help our nervous system come down a few levels. So with your hands on either side of your rib cage, I want you to take a few big deep breaths, and I want you to focus on sending the air down and out into those hands. So you're actually going to push the hands out with the sides of the rib cage, and then as you exhale, let them move back in. Add some pressure on the ribs, like don't be afraid to squeeze in as if you had like an accordion in your hand, and as you inhale, you're pressing that accordion out. As you exhale, you're pressing it, letting it fall back in, making sure you exhale completely. It can go down that far, but I want you to really make sure you're getting sideways movement in the rib cage. Yeah, don't worry too much about what the belly's doing right now. Is everybody getting a feel for A, how much concentration it takes to actually do this, and B, the sideways movement of the rib cage to some extent? If you're having a lot of trouble with that, talk to me afterward. I can show you a different technique. But essentially, spending time really focusing on breathing from this diaphragm, like I mentioned, is going to allow us to connect into what the nervous system is experiencing, but also bring it back down to its baseline state, which is just the most important thing we can do for our health on any level. If you're somebody who has a lot of dysfunction, has a lot of immobility in other ways, the simple act of spending time focusing on your breath can completely turn around your mobility. When it comes to what goes wrong with our breath, if you have a history of anything related to neck pain, neck tension, headaches, low back pain, shoulder pain sometimes, and things like anxiety, stress, fatigue that kind of comes out of nowhere, high blood pressure, and even trouble sleeping, a lot of this can stem from improper breathing. Just because we get so tight up here, it can affect our blood pressure, it can affect our nervous system's capacity to come back down to a baseline state, which is going to contribute to sleep problems, anxiety, a lot of tension through the whole body, not just the upper body. We're training ourselves to breathe from this diaphragm down here into that sideways way of the rib cage will allow for the upper body tissues to regain their normal jobs. So things like stabilizing the head, the shoulder, and moving us around through various tasks in a day. Breathing from the diaphragm is also going to encourage mobility in our upper spine and our rib cage, a common area of stiffness and tightness, which is going to allow for our lower spine, our low back, and our pelvis to remain more stable and more mobile in appropriate ways. If you have a history of low back pain, proper breathing is very, very important for that recovery as well. Proper breathing increases energy, maintains appropriate blood pressure, and it's going to calm the nervous system down. And breathing deeply is going to help to stretch the small muscles in between our ribs and our vertebrae, and the movement of our diaphragm is going to aid in proper digestion mechanics and keep our circulation flowing correctly through our cardiovascular system. So when I talk about breathing, I'm talking about the whole body. Breathing is imperative, and breathing correctly sets our system up for its best performance, and it's key in managing stress through the entire system. And as a bonus, when we breathe properly, we're going to innately just maintain a better connection to ourselves as a whole, mentally, emotionally, and physically, which means, again, as we build that awareness in our day-to-day lives, it's going to be a lot easier for us to connect into what we actually need to work on and make changes to stay healthy. So moving down from our breath, we're going to move into one of the most common areas I hear complaints about in our lower bodies, that being our lower body, our low back, and our pelvis. Our pelvis and our core are home to many of our most important organs and nerves, and instability in our pelvis is going to contribute to things like low back pain, muscular compensations through the entire body, knee conditions, and will even contribute to digestive issues in a lot of cases. Low back pain alone is one of the top healthcare expenses and complaints we face as a society right now, and one statistic points out that pretty much 80% of us will experience low back pain at some point in our lives. One complaint I probably hear about 90% of the times when it comes in is a complaint of sciatica. Unfortunately, there seems to be this rumor out there that sciatica is something that you're just stuck with for the rest of your life. I'm here to tell you that is very untrue, and sciatica is very correctable. So is low back pain and disc issues and all those things that have been framed as this just chronic issue we're stuck with. Very correctable. If somebody tells you they're not, go see somebody else, please. If our pelvis is unstable, not only is our whole skeleton at a higher risk of degeneration, specifically the hip itself, the spine, and the knees, but the muscle compensations will create an inactivity in our glute muscles, or the butt muscles, as well as hyperactivity in our hip flexors and our hamstrings. So if you've ever been somebody who just always has tight hips, it's likely because you have unstable hips, or you have an instability somewhere in your posture. When we have any tightness or tension in the body, that is essentially the nervous system's way of telling us that we're unsafe or unstable. So the first thing we want to look to is stabilizing our posture, and then we almost automatically see a lot of those tensions disappear. If the hip flexors are too tight, that tells me that your glute muscles probably aren't working properly to stabilize the pelvis, or not working efficiently. The tight hip flexors themselves, they run kind of from the front of our pelvis here, or front of our low spine here, of our pelvis. So if they're too tight, they will actually pull on the lumbar spine from the front forwards, and that can create more dysfunction into the lower back itself too. If they're also tight, they're also going to create tension around the area of our diaphragm and our digestive organs, which means tight hip flexors will contribute to poor breathing mechanics, just as poor breathing mechanics will contribute to tight hip flexors. Everything kind of works in a circuit. They'll contribute to low back pain, constipation, different digestive issues, as well as, of course, anxiety and some of those more mental conditions, because if there's instability in the body, the brain is always telling us about that. All those small changes in just our pelvis itself will create stress everywhere else in the body, and that stress is going to lead to further detriment in our health as a whole. The hip flexors are also a group that almost everybody likes to stretch in an attempt to open them up. And I'm sure we've all had the experience at some point being told that we are tight in our hips. We live in a society of sitting, especially in agricultural communities. We spend a lot of time sitting, doing some of the work that we need to do. That's just part of the job. And this definitely contributes to the tightness in our pelvis, especially in our hip flexors. There's a ratio floating around right now as to, people always ask me, well, how much do you recommend me stretching my hip flexors or whatever? And stretching is something I don't often recommend, and I'll get into that in a minute. But the ratio floating around there in terms of how much we should be offsetting our sitting with mobility work, the number that's out there right now is that for every hour of sitting or immobility you have in a day, you should be spending 1 minute of doing stretching, mobility, movement of some kind to offset that. So if you spend 8 hours a day sitting, you should be spending, that's a lot, so a minute for every hour. So that's at least 8 minutes, 8 to 15 minutes of mobility each day. And that's just an easy ratio to use when you're looking at your day-to-day routines. So when it comes to actually releasing a tight system, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, the body is really neat, especially when you look at the musculoskeletal nervous system, in that when we have a tight muscle group, the best way to actually release it is to activate the opposite muscle group. So when it comes to our hip flexors, this means we need to activate our glute muscles or our butt muscles. So if you're open to it and if you're able to, I'd like you to get into a kneeling position on the ground. So that's going to look like this, getting down here. If you're not able to get down to the ground, feel free to put one knee on a chair or stay standing. I'll show you another option. Bonus points if you're still outside of your shoes, you're the best. So in this kneeling position, I want you to make sure that you're at 90 degrees at both knees. So that one knee should be right underneath the hip, the other knee should be here. And check in and make sure the pelvis is even. So a lot of people end up here. Make sure that kind of both sides of the pelvis are even with each other here. And a really common hip flexor stretch I see all the time, and if you've done yoga, you'll have seen this too, is like leaning way forwards to stretch the hip flexor here. This isn't the best. I'm going to show you a better way. So staying in this 90-degree position, I want you to simply engage your butt muscle here so you feel that pelvis tuck under, and hands up if you're already feeling a stretch. Yeah. So squeezing that butt muscle, activating that glute muscle is going to engage this hip flexor and stretch it forwards. And then here, if you want, you can shift your weight forward a little bit, but I don't want to see any of this crazy like leaning into it. Just focus on engaging the glute here, find that stretch there, lean a little bit forwards, and you're going to go in and out of this movement. So releasing everything, engaging, pushing forwards a little bit, and then releasing. So do this about 6 times on each leg if you're down here doing it. If you're not able to get down to kneeling and you want to stay standing, you can do the same thing in this position. Take a big step back, squeeze the butt, find the stretch there, shift a little bit into the forward, and then relax. Just going in and out. So this is one of the best ways to offset long periods of sitting, spending time doing this stretch. There's many ways to do this, but this is an easy one to get people started with, going in and out for about 6 times. You can also do this, like I said, with that back leg up on a chair. Same movement. I'm not showing this very well, but same movement, just with the leg propped up on a chair. So that's going to hit your hip flexors and help to reset the pelvis in terms of tightness and places that we're stuck in, and then we can start retraining stability from there to prevent the problem from continuing. When the brain feels in control, it feels safe. And as we know, the perception of safety is going to decrease the risk of perceived threat, which is pain. In low back and osteoarthritis of the knee and the hip, research is showing that 50% of patients who show structural changes in the joints on an x-ray or imaging don't actually report any symptoms of pain with the structural changes, whereas others who report pain don't actually even show that much on an x-ray compared to those who may or may not have reported pain. This is a really interesting thing to look at when we start thinking about something as common as osteoarthritis of the knee. Knee replacements and hip replacements, super common in our society today. But when you see people who have almost more structural degeneration on an image than somebody who has extreme pain, and the people over here aren't actually reporting any pain, you have to start wondering, why is that pain there in the first place then, if the structural changes aren't actually related to the pain symptoms itself? So possible reasons as to why this occurs. The nervous system can be conditioned to a certain painful stimulus. So the location of pain can often be attributed to other stressors in the body. Or it's just a red flag being put up by the nervous system because an area is unstable and therefore feels unsafe. When you look at the to continue with the example of osteoarthritis, when you look at the underlying reasons behind why osteoarthritis occurs, typically it's because of a long-term biomechanical issue. So there's been some postural instability going on for a long time to cause that actual structural change, which means that probably the body's been feeling unsafe for a long time too, which puts you at a higher risk for a pain response. Pain and tension is the easiest way for our bodies to tell us that something is wrong. However, just because it's an easy alarm system doesn't always make it an accurate alarm system. The gluteus medius, which I've mentioned a few times, is the main muscle in charge of helping to stabilize our pelvis throughout movement. It sits along the sides of our pelvis here, right along here, and it prevents kind of our side-to-side movement in the pelvis in terms of stability. Deactivation in this muscle group is really common, and it's a common reason as to why we run into balance issues, low back complaints, and degeneration in the hips and the knees and the lower spine. Often simply activating this muscle again creates relief of many painful symptoms and prevents ongoing issues in an entire posture. I've had extreme examples of clients who come to see me after going through the gamut of pain medication, being on surgery wait lists, waiting for all these results in terms of knee pain or hip pain, and I give them one simple activation exercise for this gluteus medius muscle after they have years of complaints. And 2 weeks later, they're like, my pain's gone. How is it that easy? It shouldn't have been that easy. But again, it's bringing the system back to a place where like, oh, we're safe here now. We don't need to raise this flag anymore. Sometimes it is just as kind of simple as that. So when it comes to a gluteus medius, let's all stand up again. A simple test I like to use for people when it comes to this gluteus medius is the simple act of balancing. And all of us know that balance is important for us for various reasons, but how many of us actually practice our balance? A few people. Good. I like that. Brave raising the hands. So let's do a simple balance test now. Standing up, if you're still out of shoes, again, bonus points. I want you to simply shift your weight into one leg and bring the other foot off the ground. We're going to hold this for about 30 seconds, and I'd like you to count how many errors you make. So how many times you actually have to put your other foot down that counts as an error. Wobbling around is fine, but every time you have to actually weight bear on the other side, that counts as an error. So I'm starting timing now, and we're just gonna hold this. I'll do it with you. So spending time working on our balance not only begins to enhance our ability to stabilize our pelvis and our foot connection, which we've already mentioned before, it also enhances the connection into our stabilizing postures for the brain, and this is gonna enhance our perception of safety. 10 seconds left. Spending time practicing this simple act of balancing is gonna help us activate the glutes, activate stability in the pelvis, connect into our lower body, into our foot. Good, you can all come on down. So just keep in your head how many errors you had. We can come back to this a bit later. This simple test that I just used is also something simple you can do for yourselves to start retraining some of these things. So if you had more than 3 or 4 errors, I would say you should probably be working on this daily. Even if you had 0 errors, this is something I would recommend working on daily. When it comes to balancing, and I wore the worst shoes possible to show this to you guys today, but when it comes to balancing, we want to make sure that we're engaging this hip muscle, so actually squeezing that butt forwards, making sure we're rooting down through the whole foot. The same position we kind of found when we had both feet on the ground, where we're kind of like lifting up through the arch of the foot, pushing down through the whole foot, rooting into the ground, balancing and centering on there while squeezing this butt. When you're practicing balance, you should feel like that whole leg is working from the hip down. It shouldn't just be an ankle exercise or a hip exercise or whatever. So that's something you can spend time doing, 30 seconds a day in each foot. Do it a few times in the day. Do it while you're washing dishes, while you're answering a phone call, while you're whatever. Spend time in this position. If balancing is easy, just standing there, you can start adding simple things like nice activated high knee, bringing the leg behind you, activating this other glute to bring it behind you, going back and forth, doing steps out to the side, coming back to high knee balance. I get bonus points because I'm doing this in heels, going up and down. Adding movement to your balance is a great way to, again, challenge the system, integrate the whole body into it, making sure that you're always challenging yourself, because challenge is how we actually enhance our ability to handle stress in our lives. The more stress we can put ourselves through in a healthy way, the better off our system is going to manage it in other ways. You can all have a seat again. So as I mentioned before, chronic pain conditions affect upwards of 25% of the population. Hip and knee arthritis affects 37% of Canadians, and we spend over $60 billion per year on managing pain in Canada. And that $60 billion per year is a stat that's already 7 years old, so I'd be interested to see where it's at now, but part of me guesses it hasn't changed much, if not gone higher. Something as simple as walking properly with your core braced, pushing from your glute muscles to move you forwards and arms swinging beside you is statistically, and I can speak to this anecdotally as a clinician, the most effective way to treat and manage chronic pain, especially low back pain. Adding even 30 minutes a day, like I mentioned earlier, is proven to drastically decrease pain and inflammation levels and improve our overall quality in life and health. Makes kind of those old-fashioned ways of treating low back pain where they call for bed rest seem kind of ridiculous. Please never just go on bed rest if your back hurts. Keep moving. And I keep mentioning pain lots today, but do any of us actually know the true definition of pain? Hands up if you think you have an idea. No? So we hear about pain a lot. It's a really common issue in our healthcare system. The definition of pain is, and it's a long one, an unpleasant feeling that is conveyed to the brain by sensory neurons, the discomfort that signals actual or potential injury to the body. Pain is the reaction to a perceived threat. Pain is more than a sensation or a physical awareness of pain. It also includes perception, the subjective interpretation of discomfort. Perception gives information on the pain's location, intensity, and something about its nature. The various conscious and unconscious responses to both sensation and perception include the emotional response, which adds further definition to the overall concept of pain. So that was a very wordy definition of pain that was taken straight from medical textbook, but you can get the gist from that pain is a very relative thing to an individual, and this makes, when I was a student in my kin degree, my exercise science degree, they often told us that pain was going to be one of the hardest things to define for the majority of clients or patients that we had, because it is so perceptive and so relative to an individual. Pain at its baseline is a protection mechanism, but it's not always accurate to the health of the tissues themselves. Perception is personal, and therefore pain is going to take on personal caveats. I know for myself, when I began to burn out or get very stressed or overrun myself or overwork myself in some ways, an old back injury is probably going to knock me flat, or the leg that I broke years ago and had nerve damage in is likely going to flare up. For no physical reason, my nervous system is stressed, and that's its easiest way to get a hold of me. Because there's already a pathway there for the nervous system. It says, oh, we're stressed, must send pain, this is where it goes first. That's just the easiest way to get a hold of me. So often when it comes to pain, it's less about treating the pain itself and more about retraining our systems, tolerance to perceived stress. This is where exercise and movement can come in really handy. Exercise is, of course, a type of stressor for the body, but not all stress is bad stress. Actually, most of our active systems require some level of stress to improve. Bone density is shown to increase along the lines of stress. Blood pressure adapts to the increase we see during exercise and will adopt a lower level during rest periods because of this. And when we think of exercise, most of us think of the discomfort and the persistence it takes to get through a tough workout or the simple act of going to do a workout in the first place. But this discomfort training and persistence training carry over into our day-to-day lives, making other tasks seem easier and less inundating to our systems. What does this mean for farmers? Most farmers that I meet tell me that they get enough daily movement through their life on the farm. Whether or not this is true, when we really look at this, most realize that they don't move around quite as much as they may have used to. Farming itself, manual labor itself, agriculture has transitioned from a very hands-on, daily, laborious job to one where we spend more time using technology and more time in seated positions. Whether or not we have an organic or a more old-fashioned farm, we still end up spending a lot of time seated. Day-to-day stressors on the farm, unfortunately, don't have the same benefits for us, though they can, of course, leave us feeling exhausted, as conscious and mindful movement and connection to ourselves and health routines do. What many don't realize is that being fit to farm doesn't mean that you have to be in the gym for an hour a day. Most of us don't have time for that, nor do we have access to that sometimes in relative proximity to where we exist. In all reality, it means adding 5 to 10 minutes here and there of quality movement and health habits a few times in your day. That's it. Like I said earlier, 30 minutes a day of walking itself or any other conscious movement is all it takes to make lasting change in the quality of your life. And most farmers are shocked to hear me say that. As an exercise and a movement therapist, they expect me to give them this whole routine to do and want them to be in the gym doing this all the time. And I usually say the opposite. I'm like, if you add this exercise and this exercise a couple times in your day, guarantee you'll see a difference. You just have to be consistent with that 1 minute at a time, 2 minutes at a time, whatever it may be. So as I'm rambling on, I haven't made you move in a bit, so let's do some neck and forearm stretching while we're sitting here. So sitting up nice and tall, I want you to extend one arm out to the side and extend the wrist and actively push the air away from you. So feel like you're pushing that arm away from the shoulder. And if you want, you can also tilt your head to the opposite side. And make sure that wrist is extending back. So you should feel this through the forearm, maybe into the shoulder, and then into the neck as you lean away. And just come in and out of this. So bend the arm back, and then lean away again, push away. And again, my mother is the only one not doing this. Way in the back. So going in and out. Good, feeling that stretch. If you want, combine the breath with this. Inhale, exhale as you go through each movement. And you can do both sides as I continue talking. So our society's norms when it comes to our health have been quite reactive for the last little bit. The medical system is stuck in a practice of emergency medicine, which of course is necessary. But that being, we're treating problems after they occur versus practicing prevention medicine. I do believe that attitudes are slowly starting to shift towards proactivity, but it is a slow shift, as most things are as a society. Our bodies have evolved over time to be quite efficient at a large variety of movements. We were once, and not that long ago, hunter-gatherers, and we did everything from running, jumping, climbing, kneeling, crawling, sitting, and a whole load of other skills in a day. The average walking distance in prehistoric times was 15 kilometers per day. And unfortunately, this is weird to say at an ag conference, but the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolutions are two of the main turning points in society as to where we stopped moving and where we stopped eating appropriately for our baseline biology. And many historians will argue that point, that agriculture and industrial revolutions were the starting point for most of our chronic health conditions as well. Most of us, if asked to do any of the tasks that we used to do in prehistoric times in a day, wouldn't last longer than an hour in that lifestyle. Farming itself has evolved from a once very active and physically demanding and dynamic profession to now, as one research article put it, slightly more reclined and air-conditioned. Today, majority of us use only a handful of movements a day. If you think about your days, most of us will get up in the morning from however much sleep we got, sit down to eat breakfast, sit down to do a morning routine, get up, drive to work or drive to the farm or drive on the farm, do a few tasks through our day, usually rotating between 2 or 3 positions, sit to drive home, sit to eat, sit to do whatever we do in the evenings, and then go to bed again. So that's a handful of 3-4 movements that we're doing in total through a 12-hour day. I'm hoping after today that you leave with a few extras to add into or integrate into your day-to-day routines. If you haven't noticed already, we've covered a lot of ground in this hour in terms of different movements, all while sneaking in different knowledge points. It hasn't impacted our productivity to add a few seconds here and there of conscious movement, and likely it's kept you a bit more attentive to what I'm saying, I hope anyway. Most of us have had more than a handful of health complaints in our lifetimes. And most of us know that movement and diet are paramount to our health. This isn't new knowledge. We all know that this stuff is good for us. So why then is it not more common, or rather, why isn't it easier for us to make shifts in ourselves to do better for ourselves? It isn't for a lack of resources. We have those with us all the time, between our own bodies, our minds, and our food, in addition to the internet overloading us with health tips and tricks. Please don't listen to the internet all the time, though. We still find excuses as to why we can't change. Daily, I interact with potential or current clients who don't believe that they are capable of change. The reason behind this attitude includes a belief that there isn't a system that's going to work for them, a sense of comfort found in their discomfort, and this isn't often a conscious thought that people have. When something is familiar, our brains are automatically going to associate with our survival, and it's going to be work to change our brains into a new form of survival. There's often a fear of taking that first step, a fear of seeking resources until we absolutely have to. We all know somebody who waited a little bit too long to go see their doctor or go see somebody with a problem. And there's often a barrier set by long-standing habits that they already have. Again, this is related to our brain's perception of our survival and our safety. There's a perception that things just run in the family. I most commonly hear this about knee osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, things like diabetes, that kind of thing. Like I said earlier, you may be genetically predisposed to something, but that really is no excuse to just accept the fact that you might come down with it or have it already. Things are always changeable. There's often a lack of support from peers or family because the peers are dealing with any one of the above reasons for not changing or having issues. And there's a belief that maybe they aren't deserving of said change, and this again is often an unconscious belief, or that they don't have time to commit to change. The time factor is a big one in today's society. Health is going to be an ongoing series of habits and decisions that you make every single day. And when we break it down to our every single day, what you really need to do to make long-term change does come down to those minutes, seconds, and conscious thought time that I've mentioned a few times. It doesn't need to be a big workout every day. It needs to be a very small, bite-sized piece of change, some sort of change, healthy change. Every day is going to be a new adventure, so those decisions are going to change daily. The best solution is forming a solid lineup of habits to help you along the decision-making trail when it comes to our health. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest barriers that I have clients tell me about is not having enough time to include healthy new habits into their life, or being too busy to commit to a coaching schedule, complete daily tasks to support their long-term health, or take time for themselves. A lot of this involves choosing to remove the inconvenience of health from our lives, and ironically, therefore, making health more convenient, and making it the obvious choice. The most common example of this would be taking the stairs instead of taking an escalator. There's always ways in our day-to-day lives where we can choose something that is a little bit harder or more inconvenient, but in that process, making just a new habit part of our routine. That's how you actually start making change, small little things like that. So I'll challenge you to think about this for yourselves. What small change could you make today to align with an ideal life or an ideal level of health that you maybe have in mind for yourself? I'd bet that there's something you could shift that takes up 30 seconds or less each day, but could have a much larger impact when done consistently as a whole. Some easy suggestions that I have. The first one would be to begin drinking more water. So hydration is something, again, that most of us are aware that we should be doing more of, but somehow it doesn't make its way into our day-to-day routines. The majority of people are not drinking nearly enough water, especially those of us who live in the middle of Canada where it's usually very cold or very hot. It's one extreme or the other. I can tell the minute that I look at somebody and work on their tissues what their hydration is like. So why is hydration so important? Well, why is gas and oil important for your vehicle? Water does many things for our body. Our brain function relies on proper hydration, and we'll use majority of what we get into ourselves immediately just for baseline functioning. That means all the menial tasks that your brain has to do for each day, it's automatically going to use whatever hydration you have for that alone. All of our tissues, all the way down to a cell level, require water to be healthy. If our cells aren't healthy, our tissues don't function at their full levels, and we pay the toll. Things like joint stiffness, muscle soreness, fatigue, headaches, bloating, water retention, arthritis, sleep issues, low mood quality, you name it, I can probably relate it back to your hydration habits. For those of you with existing health conditions or looking to lose weight, this should be of extra importance for you. How much do you need to drink? You should have a water bottle with you throughout your day and be taking sips routinely. Generally, for most healthy individuals, I would say 2 to 3 liters of water a day for a healthy adult, which is A, more than that 8 glass a day recommendation, and B, probably way more than most of you are drinking in it each day. For those of you already raising a process in your head about, oh, I'm gonna have to go to the bathroom more, it's gonna be more convenient, blah, 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 your kidneys thank you in advance. This won't be a long-term inconvenience, but like anything, you need to allow for an adjustment period. Something that often helps with the frequent flyer trips to the bathroom is adding things like lemon juice or lime juice or electrolytes to the water. That just gives something for the cells to latch onto, and therefore they're gonna retain the water in a more productive way instead of just passing it through the system. When it comes to adding more hydration, one simple way to make this easier for you is to just have a water bottle with you at all times. If it's there, you're more likely to drink from it. If it's one that you can reuse and refill through the day, even better. You're more likely to refill it when it's empty. That is where you start making that change, and over time you'll notice like, oh, I forgot my water bottle today. This feels weird. I'm actually really thirsty. You'll start noticing things like that. But until you start making that shift, you won't notice the contrast, and that contrast is where the awareness sits. The next simple, I put these all in quotations because they're simple, but people still struggle to do them. But the next simple thing that I often recommend people start with in terms of adding a healthy habit to your day is a simple act of taking 5 minutes. So we all have 5 minutes somewhere. I don't care how busy you are, what your life is like, there is 5 minutes in a day that you can find to check in with yourself. This isn't about making sure you hit the gym every day or only eating perfect meals or only about adding dedicated meditation or movement practices to your day. I want you to take 5 minutes to do whatever the heck you want to do, but it has to be a conscious saying like this 5 minutes is for me to do this instead of just buzzing through your day mindlessly. Some suggestions I could make for this 5-minute practice would be spending 5 minutes practicing that breath work I just taught you, breathing from the diaphragm, breathing down to the pelvis, breathing through the whole body, spending 5 minutes dedicating your mind just to that simple practice. 5 minutes to go for a stroll outside your office or outside the tractor, or outside your home or whatever you may be doing to check in with yourself. That 5 minutes of just knowing that you're taking 5 minutes to go for a short walk. Going outside, even better. Taking 5 minutes to get up and down off the floor or do any other combination that you want to do, including, but definitely not limited to, any of the movements that we did today. So you can get a lot done in 5 minutes if you dedicate your mind to those 5 minutes. 5 minutes to just let your mind clear while sipping your favorite drink or the water you should probably be drinking anyway. And 5 technology-free moments to meditate on all the things you're grateful in a day. Writing these down would be an added benefit. The simple act of taking those 5 minutes can make a huge difference for most people that I meet, because most people I meet are existing in a very stressed out state and are complaining that they don't have time. But sometimes when we just start taking those 5 minutes, we realize, oh, I just took 5 minutes. That means I could probably find another 5 minutes, or I could find a minute here to do this. Again, finding that contrast where we start making one small change, realize we can do it, makes it a lot easier to make the next small change. And then over a period of time with consistency and effort, we see those bigger changes happen on a holistic level. Everyone can acknowledge that quality movement in our lives positively impacts our well-being. Again, simple knowledge, we all know this. The problem here is that most of us require a shift in our habits to maintain a healthier lifestyle. Even when we know it's the best option, we'll still opt for a quick solution to mask the symptoms. Ignorance is bliss, right? I'll leave you with a final question today. If we could make the shift in human habits towards using movement as a valuable medicine, what change could and would this create in our society as a whole? That's all I have for you today. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to ask. I don't know if we have time to open the question period. I'm also going to be sticking around for the next little bit, so you can come find me and let me know. If you are interested in any of the exercises that I showed you today, I can email you some videos of them so you have reminders of them at home. Just come see me afterwards and I'll give you my info to get a hold of me. Thank you so much.